Before everything changed, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where my life was headed. My name is Ellery Voss, and I grew up in a family that defined success by wealth, power, and reputation. But sometimes the path you expect isn't the one you end up walking, and the people you think will stand by you turn out to be the ones who push you away the hardest. I never imagined that choosing love would cost me everything: my family, my future, even my identity, and that the person I loved would hold a secret that would turn my world upside down. This is my story of rejection, struggle, and unexpected redemption. If you want to hear the full journey, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And I want to know what you think. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what part of the story caught your attention the most. This is just the beginning. My name is Ellery Voss. I'm 30 years old, tall with thick curly black hair and a strong build, an image I was raised to maintain within the walls of the Voss family estate in Seattle. The Voss family for generations has been one of the most powerful and wealthy clans in the city, their name synonymous with success and influence in the real estate world. Growing up, everything about my life felt predetermined. I would take over the family business, marry someone equally privileged, and continue the legacy. But everything changed the day I fell in love with Faye. She wasn't rich, polished, or from a prestigious family. She was a coffee barista, hardworking and kind, living paycheck to paycheck, with little knowledge of the world I'd been groomed to inherit. That choice, marrying her, turned my world upside down. The first sign that my family wouldn't accept this choice came in the form of a call from my mother, Margot Voss. Her voice, cold and sharp, broke through my excitement the day I told her about Faye. "Ellery," she said, her tone like ice, "she's not fit for our family. Don't make a fool of yourself." The words weren't just a rejection of Faye, they were a rejection of me, of the man I was choosing to be. I tried to explain how much Faye meant to me, how genuine and strong she was despite not having the money or connections my family valued so dearly. But Margot wouldn't hear it. She warned me that this decision would bring shame and ruin to our name. Not long after, my father, Gideon Voss, the patriarch and the business mastermind of our empire, reinforced the message. I visited him in his sleek downtown office, hoping to find understanding, but instead, I was met with cold indifference. "I will never let our fortune fall into the hands of a worthless girl," he said bluntly. His eyes didn't flicker with anger or disappointment. They were empty, resolute. To him, Faye's background wasn't just a flaw. It was a disqualification that threatened everything the family had built. I left his office feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Even my older brother, Quincy, who I had once hoped would be my ally, turned his back on me. A message from him landed in my phone one evening. "Who do you think you are, choosing a poor woman? Forget this family." There was no warmth, no attempt to reach out, only cold disdain. The brother I had grown up with was now a stranger, standing firmly on the side of family tradition, while I stood alone, clutching the love I refused to abandon. The rejection wasn't just emotional, it was practical and ruthless. My name was slowly erased from the family records. Invitations to family events stopped arriving, and where there had once been mentions of me as the heir to the Voss legacy, there was now silence. The echoes of my presence were fading fast. When I tried to reach out, I was met with walls of silence or sharp dismissals. The very people who had once celebrated my every success now treated me as if I were invisible or worse, a disgrace. But perhaps the cruelest part was how my family's contempt reached those I loved most. Faye told me about the whispers she heard when she walked into my family's social circles. She was called the stain on the Voss family, a phrase that cut deeper than any insult aimed directly at me. Our friends began to distance themselves, torn between loyalty to me and the pressure from the Voss name. I was losing more than just family approval. I was losing community, support, the foundation I thought would hold me steady. At a company party thrown by the family business, I experienced the sting of that rejection firsthand. Instead of the welcoming smiles and hearty handshakes I'd known in the past, I was led to the farthest corner of the room, seated at a small table where I was the only guest not recognized or celebrated. The cold stares and whispered comments filled the air like a thick fog. I tried to pretend it didn't hurt, but deep inside, I was shattered. The man I was meant to become, the son and heir, had been replaced with someone unwanted and outcast. I tried to explain how special Faye was, how genuine and hardworking she was despite her modest background, but Margot wouldn't hear any of it. To her, my love for Faye was a stain on the Voss name, a reckless mistake that would bring shame and ruin. Not long after, I sought out my father, Gideon Voss, the patriarch who had built our family's empire with an iron fist and ruthless determination. I hoped to find a flicker of understanding in his eyes, but instead I was met with cold indifference. Sitting across from him in his sleek office, I felt smaller than ever. "I will never let our fortune fall into the hands of a worthless girl," he said bluntly. There was no anger in his voice, no trace of disappointment, only an unyielding finality. His words hit me like a blow. In his eyes, Faye wasn't just beneath me. She was a threat to everything he and generations before him had worked for. The man who was supposed to be my protector instead became my harshest judge. Then came Quincy, my older brother, the one I had hoped would stand by me. But even he turned his back, sending a cold message that crushed any hope I had left. "Who do you think you are, choosing a poor woman? Forget this family." There was no warmth, no brotherly concern, just icy disdain. The man I had grown up with was gone, replaced by someone who valued family reputation over blood ties. The rejection I faced wasn't just emotional, it was practical, merciless, and total. Invitations stopped arriving. My name was erased from family gatherings and social calendars. The legacy I was born into, the identity I was raised to inherit, slipped through my fingers as if it had never belonged to me. I reached out, hoping for a crack in the armor, a sign that love or loyalty could still exist. But there was only silence or sharp dismissals. The people who once celebrated my every achievement now treated me like a stranger, or worse, a disgrace. What hurt the most was the way their contempt spilled over into the life I was trying to build with Faye. She told me about the whispers and stares whenever she walked into my family's social circles. They called her the stain on the Voss family, a phrase so cruel it cut deeper than any insult directed at me. Our closest friends began to distance themselves, caught between their loyalty to me and the suffocating pressure from the Voss name. I was losing more than family approval. I was losing community, support, the very foundation I thought would hold me steady. One night, at a lavish company party thrown by the Voss family, the sting of rejection became unbearable. Instead of warm greetings and hearty handshakes, I was ushered to the farthest corner of the room. The small table I was assigned was tucked away from the glittering chandeliers and lively chatter, a place where I was visible but not acknowledged. The cold stares and whispered comments felt like daggers piercing my skin. I forced a smile, pretending the humiliation didn't chip away at my pride, but inside, I was breaking. This was the man I was supposed to be, the son, the heir, the future of the Voss legacy, and yet I was treated like an outcast. Every day, the weight of their rejection pressed down on me like a relentless storm, threatening to drown me. But somewhere beneath the hurt, a fire ignited. I could have turned my back on Faye, abandoned the love that challenged everything I'd been taught to value, but I refused. Their coldness, their rejection, only proved how deeply I believed in her and us. It forced me to redefine who I was. Not Ellery Voss, the privileged heir, but Ellery Voss, the man who chose love over legacy, authenticity over tradition. This flat-out rejection was the brutal beginning of a long, painful journey, a test of heart, spirit, and the courage to stand against everything I'd ever known. It set the stage for the battles to come and the truths I would have to face. Summary. In this opening stage, Ellery Voss reveals the immediate and harsh rejection he faces from his family after announcing his intention to marry Faye, a poor coffee barista. I'd grown up hearing stories about the Voss legacy, the fortune passed down through generations, the sprawling estates, the investments, and the endless possibilities. I was supposed to be next in line, the rightful heir to everything my family had built. Yet now, all of it was taken away as if I'd never existed. I sat in silence, the letter trembling in my hands, trying to absorb the reality that my future, once so certain, was suddenly obliterated. It wasn't just a loss of money, it was a loss of identity. It was my family saying, "You are no longer one of us." When I confronted my mother again, hoping for some mercy or explanation beyond the cold legalese, her voice was even harder than before. "You made your choice, Ellery. You chose her over us. Don't expect the privileges you once took for granted." I wanted to scream at her, to beg her to understand, but all I could do was swallow the lump in my throat and nod. I was no longer her golden boy. My father was quieter about it, but just as unforgiving. At a rare family gathering I attended, more out of obligation than hope, he refused to look me in the eye. When I mentioned Faye, he dismissed me with a curt wave. "There's nothing more to discuss," he said. Even Quincy, the brother who once shared laughs and childhood secrets with me, took a new harsh tone. "You're done here, Ellery. You're dead to us." The walls I had trusted to protect me crumbled one by one. It became clear that my family wasn't just disappointed, they were punishing me. I watched as my name disappeared from invitations to family dinners and holidays. Photos of me vanished from the walls of the Voss estate. My achievements, once celebrated, were ignored or even denied. The family business, which I had hoped to join one day, was no longer an option. I was cut off. The sense of being abandoned didn't only come from formal letters or legal documents. It manifested in subtle, painful ways. Mutual friends suddenly stopped returning my calls. Old acquaintances who once smiled warmly avoided eye contact. It felt like I was erased not just from the family ledger, but from the world I'd grown up in. Faye, despite the cold world around us, remained my anchor. She never faltered or wavered. When I came home after another exhausting day of dealing with the fallout, she greeted me with a smile that made the crushing loneliness outside our door bearable. But even she wasn't immune to the sting of my family's disdain. She told me how, at the coffee shop where she worked before, people whispered when she mentioned my last name. "They say you're a charity case," she admitted quietly. "That you don't deserve him." Those words broke my heart in a way I hadn't expected. The woman I loved, whose strength and kindness had drawn me to her, was being attacked because of who I was and who my family refused to accept her as. Our life, once imagined as a hopeful new beginning, became a daily battle against prejudice and judgment. I realized that the fight was no longer just about love, it was about survival. The financial support I once expected from my family vanished. Without access to trust funds or inheritance, Faye and I had to rely solely on our own means. We lived modestly in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Seattle. Every dollar mattered. Every expense was carefully budgeted. The contrast between my past life of luxury and the simple meals and worn furniture of our new home was stark and painful. But even amid hardship, there was a strange kind of freedom. For the first time, I was living life on my own terms. No longer a puppet of family expectations, I could decide who I wanted to be and what kind of man I wanted to become. Yet the loneliness was still crushing. The weekends I once spent at the Voss estate, surrounded by relatives, were replaced by quiet evenings with just Faye and me. Sometimes I would stare at the empty chair where my father should have been, or think of the birthday parties where I was once the center of attention. Those memories were bittersweet reminders of what I had lost. Even worse were the whispers and gossip that spread like wildfire through Seattle's high society. The news that I had been cut off, that I had chosen a poor woman, became the topic of dinner parties and exclusive clubs. I became a cautionary tale, a man who threw away a fortune for love and paid the price. One evening, during a charity gala I was no longer invited to, I overheard guests muttering about the fallen Voss heir and the girl who dragged him down. The humiliation was a heavy cloak I wore every day. Still, amidst all this, I refused to let the bitterness consume me. Faye's unwavering support was my lifeline. She reminded me that money and status were fleeting, but love and character were real. She worked tirelessly, taking extra shifts and helping me stay grounded. Together, we dreamed of a future where our worth wouldn't be measured by family name or bank account, but by what we built with our own hands. The pain of being cut off from my inheritance was a harsh lesson in loyalty, sacrifice, and the true meaning of family. It shattered the illusion that blood alone defines belonging. I was left to carve a new path, one that no longer included the Voss fortune, but held the promise of something far more valuable, a life earned on my own terms, with the woman I loved by my side. My closest friends, the people who had stood by me through thick and thin, were pressured by the family's influence to distance themselves. One by one, I noticed the dwindling number of calls and messages. Conversations that once flowed freely now turned awkward or vanished altogether. Even those I trusted seemed torn, their loyalty tested by the weight of the Voss name and the implicit threats of social and financial repercussions. Faye bore the brunt of this isolation too. Before our life together, she had been a friendly face at the neighborhood coffee shop, someone who greeted regulars with a warm smile and remembered their orders. But after the family's rejection became public knowledge, whispers followed her everywhere she went. I remember the day she told me, voice heavy with hurt, that some customers refused to be served by her once they learned she was the woman who ruined Ellery's future. The stigma attached to her was a cruel extension of my family's contempt. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her reputation, her dignity, and her sense of belonging. We found ourselves isolated in a world that once welcomed us both. Even among casual acquaintances and neighbors, the change was palpable. There were fewer invitations to social outings, fewer casual hellos when we passed by on the street. The invisible barrier constructed by the Voss family's disdain was everywhere. It kept us apart from the community we once thought was ours to share. This social isolation was perhaps the most excruciating form of rejection because it seeped into every corner of our lives. The silence at family dinners was replaced by the empty quiet of our small apartment. The absence of friends' laughter became the background hum of loneliness. Yet even amid this cold isolation, Faye and I found solace in each other's company. Our evenings were filled with long talks about dreams and plans, of rebuilding and redefining success on our own terms. But no matter how strong our bond, the ache of being cut off from a larger support system never fully disappeared. I often caught myself looking back at old photographs, remembering the lavish family holidays and celebrations that now felt like distant, unreachable memories. The life of privilege and ease I had known was gone, and in its place was a world that demanded resilience and self-reliance. I began to understand that social isolation was not just about losing friends or invitations, it was about losing the sense of belonging and identity that came from being part of something bigger. It forced me to confront the stark reality that the world I had been groomed to enter no longer wanted me. The challenge was not only external, but deeply internal. I struggled with questions of worth and purpose. Who was I without the Voss name? Could I still claim a place in a society that had turned its back on me? These questions haunted me in the quiet moments, testing my resolve. But amid the darkness, small lights appeared. Faye's unwavering belief in me was a beacon of hope. She reminded me daily that family was not just about blood or wealth, but about love, loyalty, and shared dreams. Our love became our sanctuary from the harshness of the outside world. I also found unexpected kindness in places I hadn't anticipated. Some old friends quietly reached out, offering support without judgment. A few colleagues at work showed me respect and encouragement. These moments reminded me that social isolation was not absolute and that new connections could be forged beyond the confines of my past life. Slowly, I began to rebuild my social world, not by reclaiming what was lost, but by creating something new. I joined local community groups and volunteer organizations, places where status was irrelevant and actions mattered. Here, I discovered a different kind of belonging, a belonging based on shared values and mutual respect. The contrast between the exclusion from my old social circles and the warmth of these new communities was stark. It taught me a vital lesson that social acceptance could be found in places where authenticity mattered more than pedigree. Yet, the isolation from my family still weighed heavily. Every holiday season, when the city shimmered with lights and laughter, I felt the absence of my family most acutely. The silence in our apartment was deafening. I wondered how different my life would have been if they had chosen love and acceptance over pride and rejection. But those thoughts, as painful as they were, also fueled my determination. I refused to let their rejection define my future or my happiness. Social isolation, with all its loneliness and pain, became a catalyst for growth. It stripped away the superficial and forced me to confront who I was at my core. It pushed me to develop resilience and empathy. My mother, Margot Voss, who had been cold and dismissive in private, now made her disdain unmistakably public. At a charity event attended by Seattle's elite, she spoke to her circle with a venomous smile, making sure everyone heard, "Ellery has dug himself into the dirt with his poor choices." The phrase echoed through the room, whispered among acquaintances, like a poison seeping into every conversation. I was there, forced to witness it, my heart pounding with a mix of shame and disbelief. The woman who once smiled proudly at my side now weaponized her words to dismantle my reputation piece by piece. The humiliation was compounded by my brother Quincy's behavior. In a family meeting intended to discuss business strategies, Quincy erupted with fury in front of distant relatives and business associates alike. "You're a disgrace to this family. Don't show your face again," he shouted, his voice echoing off the polished walls. I wanted to reply, to defend myself, but I was rendered mute by the sheer force of his anger and the stunned silence that followed. The damage was done in a flash, and the whispers began to spread like wildfire. Public humiliation wasn't confined to family circles. The news media, always hungry for scandal in high society, caught wind of the drama and sensationalized it. Tabloids and online gossip sites published stories with headlines dripping in contempt. "Heir lost to love. Voss scandal rocks Seattle elite. The fall of Ellery Voss." Photos of Faye and me, once private and cherished, were splashed across websites with commentary that mocked our modest lives and painted us as outcasts. Even casual acquaintances I had once considered friends began to treat me differently. Invitations disappeared and conversations stopped when I entered a room. I became the man everyone whispered about, but no one wanted to confront. The humiliation wasn't just external. It invaded every aspect of my existence. I felt the weight of judgment in every glance and heard the sting of ridicule in every word left unspoken. It was a slow, suffocating erosion of my confidence and self-worth. The contrast to my past life was brutal. I remembered times when my name opened doors, when my presence commanded respect and admiration. Now, it seemed to close them shut, leaving me isolated and vulnerable. At times, I wondered if the public spectacle was designed to break me, to prove to everyone, including myself, that my choice to stand by Faye was a foolish mistake. But what hurt most was seeing the impact on Faye. She bore the brunt of the public shame without complaint. The whispers followed her wherever she went, and the smiles she once received at work turned into cold stares or outright hostility. I watched her shrink under the weight of other people's judgments, and it tore me apart. Yet, despite the humiliation, Faye remained resolute. She refused to let the venom of others dictate her worth or our future. Her courage in the face of public scorn inspired me daily. Together we learned to armor ourselves with each other's strength and the belief that truth and love would ultimately prevail over gossip and cruelty. Public humiliation also forced me to reevaluate who I wanted to be. No longer could I rely on a name or status to define me. I had to rebuild my identity from the ground up, shaped by resilience, character, and the values Faye and I shared. The humiliation became a crucible, burning away arrogance and entitlement, leaving behind a man more grounded and self-aware. It was an excruciating process, but also a necessary one. Through the haze of public shame, small victories emerged. The quiet moments where a stranger offered a kind word, the growing circle of people who judged me not by my family name, but by my actions, reminded me that reputation could be reclaimed, not by birthright, but by integrity. In hindsight, this stage was a pivotal turning point. It marked the low point from which I could only rise. The public humiliation was devastating, but it also steeled my resolve to prove, not just to my family, but to the world, that my choice was right and my worth was my own. The doctor's diagnosis was grim, a rare and aggressive illness that required immediate and expensive treatment. The news hit me like a thunderbolt. For the first time, the fragile stability we had managed to maintain was shattered by fear and uncertainty. Without the financial support of my family, the burden of treatment costs fell entirely on us. I was forced to borrow money at exorbitant interest rates, juggling multiple jobs to cover hospital bills, medication, and therapy sessions. The stress was overwhelming. Nights blurred into days as I balanced hospital visits with work, all while trying to keep a semblance of normalcy for Faye. But the isolation we had suffered before seemed to multiply now. Even as Faye lay weakened and vulnerable, the coldness from my family remained unyielding. When I reached out for help, hoping for some compassion, I was met with callous dismissal. My mother's words, when she did speak, were nothing short of cruel. "You're wasting money on nonsense. She's just a burden, Ellery. Stop throwing away the family's reputation and resources on a lost cause." Those words pierced deeper than any physical pain. My father's silence was equally deafening. Instead of support, I felt a wall of indifference, as if my pain was invisible and unworthy of acknowledgement. Quincy went further. Rumors spread that Faye's illness was a ploy to manipulate me into asking for money. The malicious gossip was relentless. The pressure mounted as Faye's condition worsened. The weight of financial strain, social rejection, and emotional exhaustion threatened to crush us. I saw the toll it took on Faye, the moments when she looked at me with tears in her eyes, silently apologizing for being a burden. But I refused to give in to despair. I reminded her every day that we were in this together, that our love was stronger than any illness or hardship. We leaned on each other in ways we never had before. This turning point forced me to confront harsh truths about my family and myself. I realized that their rejection was not just about me or my choice of partner. It was about control, pride, and the fear of losing status. They were willing to let me suffer to prove a point. This realization hardened my resolve. I vowed not to let their cruelty dictate my life or break my spirit. Faye's illness also became a catalyst for change. It ignited a fierce determination within us to fight not just for her health, but for a future free from the shadows of my family's legacy. We began researching treatments, reaching out to specialists, and seeking alternative therapies. The journey was grueling, filled with setbacks and moments of despair, but it was also filled with hope and the unwavering belief that we could overcome. The community we had built outside of my family's influence stepped in with support. Friends who brought meals, neighbors who offered rides to appointments, and strangers who donated to our medical fund. Their kindness was a lifeline. Amid the darkest days, I discovered a new kind of family, one built on empathy and shared humanity rather than blood and money. Financially, the struggle pushed me to find creative solutions. I took on freelance work and started small side businesses to supplement our income. The exhaustion was relentless, but every dollar earned was a step toward security. I learned to live within strict budgets, prioritizing Faye's care above all else. The turning point was not just about illness or money. It was about growth and transformation. It forced me to shed the illusions of privilege and entitlement I had grown up with and embrace a reality defined by perseverance, love, and grit. She was the lead researcher behind a groundbreaking treatment for the very rare disease that had afflicted her, a treatment that was on the verge of receiving a patent and changing lives worldwide. I was stunned. The woman I had stood by through every hardship was not only fighting for her own health, but had dedicated her life to saving others through science. The revelation was almost surreal. Faye explained that she had kept her identity secret because she feared the corporate and political forces that could try to exploit or discredit her work. She wanted to protect herself and her research until the moment was right to share it with the world. Hearing this, I felt a swell of pride mixed with renewed hope. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about purpose and legacy, one we could build together on our own terms. As she described the countless hours in the lab, the setbacks, the breakthroughs, and the sacrifices, I saw a new dimension of her strength and courage. The illness that had threatened to consume her had not defeated her spirit. It had fueled her determination to create something meaningful and lasting. With this secret revealed, the dynamic of our lives shifted. No longer were we just two individuals struggling against the world's rejection. We were partners with a shared mission and a powerful vision for the future. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I started to see our hardships not as defeats, but as the foundation for a comeback story that could not be denied. But the revelation was not without risks. We knew that once the news got out, it would attract attention, both positive and negative. We assembled a small but dedicated team of trusted allies, scientists, lawyers, and business experts who believed in Faye's vision and were committed to helping us navigate the treacherous waters ahead. We launched a biotech startup centered around her groundbreaking treatment, one that promised to save countless lives affected by rare diseases. The early days were filled with uncertainty and intense pressure. Investors were skeptical at first, wary of the controversy surrounding the Voss name and the tumultuous past that now seemed inseparable from our story. But as the scientific data and clinical trials began to speak for themselves, support grew steadily. Media coverage shifted from scandal to intrigue, and soon the story of the Voss heir's wife turned scientist captured the public imagination in a way no one expected. The biotech company grew rapidly, attracting millions in investment and garnering prestigious awards. Our success was not just financial. It was a validation of every struggle and sacrifice we had endured. The man who had been disowned and humiliated was now a co-founder and public face of a transformative movement in medicine. The power dynamic shifted dramatically in unexpected ways. My family, who had once cast me out, now found themselves watching from the sidelines as the world hailed Faye's breakthrough. Their empire, built on old money and traditional industries, began to feel the pressure of innovation and progress that we represented. At high-profile events and conferences, I stood proudly beside Faye, speaking not as a disgraced heir but as a partner in a mission that transcended wealth and status. The contrast between the man I had been and the man I was becoming was stark. Where once I had been shunned and dismissed, I was now sought after for advice, collaboration, and investment. The Voss name still held weight, but it was now associated with resilience, innovation, and transformation, values Faye and I embodied. The power shift wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Our success began to bridge the gap between us and the world we had been shut out from. Invitations returned, but this time on our terms. We chose the events we attended, the partnerships we pursued, and the causes we championed. No longer victims of rejection, we were architects of our destiny. Yet, with this newfound power came new challenges. The spotlight was relentless, and every move we made was scrutinized. Competitors and detractors, including some within my family's circles, attempted to undermine our progress through legal challenges, smear campaigns, and corporate sabotage. But armed with the truth and a dedicated team, we fought back fiercely. The experience hardened us, making our commitment to each other and our work even stronger. The power shift also brought reconciliation in its own complex way. Members of my family who had once turned their backs began to reach out. Some with apologies, others with cautious interest in the company we built. It was a bittersweet moment, proof that success could mend bridges, but also a reminder of the pain that had preceded it. My family's real estate and energy ventures, once unchallenged titans, now faced fierce competition from the new wave of technology and medicine that we were pioneering. Business partners who once lined up eagerly to collaborate with the Voss Corporation began reconsidering their alliances. Contracts were delayed or quietly redirected toward our company's ventures. Shareholders expressed concern about the family's ability to adapt, and stock values began to fluctuate in response to the growing presence of our biotech startup. The public narrative had shifted dramatically. While my family's name was still known for wealth and power, it was now also associated with resistance to change, internal conflict, and decline. The old guard's pride and refusal to embrace innovation became liabilities in a world moving rapidly forward. Quincy, once the proud and confident heir apparent, found himself at the center of mounting pressures. Internal investigations revealed questionable financial decisions and mismanagement within some of the Voss family's holdings. The strain of defending a legacy under siege took a toll on his reputation and mental health. Ultimately, shareholders and board members pressured Quincy to step down as CEO of the family corporation. His resignation was a public acknowledgement of the serious challenges facing the Voss empire and marked a dramatic fall from grace for a man who had once scorned me as a failure. The scandal surrounding Quincy's departure made headlines, casting a shadow over the family's business and personal affairs. It was a painful irony that the brother who had sought to distance himself from me was now engulfed in controversy as our company flourished. While the consequences for my family were severe, They underscored the profound shift in power that Faye and I had helped bring about. Our success was not just a personal victory, but a catalyst for transformation in industries and communities long resistant to change. Yet, amid the turmoil, I was mindful of the complexities involved. My family's fall from power was not a cause for celebration, but a sobering reminder of how fragile legacies built on privilege and tradition could be. I felt a mix of emotions: satisfaction at our progress, sorrow for the fractures within my family, and a deep responsibility to ensure that our success was used for positive and lasting impact. The serious consequences extended beyond business. Relationships within my family were strained to breaking points. Some relatives blamed me and Faye for the upheaval, accusing us of betrayal and greed. Others quietly reassessed their own positions and values, seeking paths toward reconciliation and adaptation. The division was palpable, but it also opened space for dialogue about the future. For Faye and me, the consequences were a testament to how far we had come from the isolation and hardship of our early days. We had turned rejection into resilience and power, but we also bore the weight of the changes we had unleashed. Our journey was no longer just personal. It was entwined with the destiny of a family, a corporation, and a community. Amid all this, we remained grounded in our mission to advance medical science and improve lives. We invested profits into research, patient support programs, and community outreach, ensuring that our success translated into real-world benefits. The serious consequences we faced reinforced our commitment to integrity and purpose. Reflecting on this stage, I recognize it as one of the most challenging and defining periods in our journey. The fallout from our rise brought disruption and pain, but also illuminated the necessity of change and the potential for renewal. After everything Faye and I had endured, the rejection, the struggle, the public humiliation, the illness, and the seismic power shift that upended my family's empire, we finally arrived at a place that felt like a meaningful conclusion to our tumultuous journey. It was a moment not just of victory, but of profound reflection and transformation. The path to this point had been long and winding, filled with pain and sacrifice, but also resilience, love, and an unwavering commitment to forging our own destiny. The final outcome was marked by a powerful scene that brought closure and unexpected reconciliation. My mother, Margot Voss, whom I had once feared would never accept us, appeared at a major conference where Faye was presenting the latest advancements of her company's groundbreaking treatment. She came not as a distant critic, but as a woman transformed by time and the undeniable impact of Faye's work. With tears in her eyes and a voice thick with emotion, she approached me backstage. "Ellery," she whispered, "I never understood until now. You and Faye have done more than I ever imagined. You are the pride I never allowed myself to see." It was a moment charged with vulnerability and healing, an acknowledgement of the mistakes of the past, and a tentative step toward forgiveness. I looked into her eyes and saw not just regret, but hope for a renewed relationship, one built on honesty rather than expectation. But even more meaningful than family acceptance was the realization that I no longer needed their approval to define my worth. I had learned that true value comes from within, from the love we give, the courage we show, and the lives we touch. Standing beside Faye, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey we had shared. We had built something far greater than wealth or status. We had created a legacy of hope, innovation, and resilience that could inspire others facing adversity. Our company continued to grow, making life-saving treatments accessible to thousands and advancing medical science in ways previously thought impossible. The impact was tangible, a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of believing in oneself. This final stage also carried a message about the nature of family and belonging. I understood that family is not solely defined by blood or wealth, but by the bonds forged through love, sacrifice, and shared values. While my biological family had once rejected me, I had found a new family in the community of scientists, friends, and supporters who stood by us. Our story became one of transformation, not just of fortune, but of identity and purpose. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is potential for light, for change, and for reconciliation. Reflecting on everything, I realized that the journey was never just about proving my family wrong or reclaiming a lost legacy. It was about discovering who I truly am and what kind of life I want to live. The final outcome was not just an end, but a beginning, a chance to embrace the future with hope, compassion, and integrity. I share this story not to boast of success, but to offer a message of hope to anyone who feels rejected or lost. No matter how steep the fall, how bitter the rejection, there is always a way forward. Through love, resilience, and belief in oneself, it is possible to rise, to rebuild, and to create a life that is meaningful and true. After the storm of rejection, hardship, and upheaval that defined so many years of my life, Faye and I found ourselves standing at the edge of something new, something far beyond personal victory or financial success. It was the moment where survival gave way to purpose, and our journey transformed from a fight against the odds into a mission to build a lasting legacy. Our biotech company had not only thrived, but had become a beacon of hope for thousands facing rare and devastating illnesses. The groundbreaking treatments that Faye developed were saving lives and opening doors to medical possibilities that once seemed impossible. But the real triumph, I realized, was not in the accolades or the profits. It was in the impact we were able to make on people's lives. From the very beginning, we knew that our success had to be more than just about us. It had to extend to those who had been overlooked or forgotten by a system that favored wealth and privilege over compassion and innovation. We dedicated a significant portion of our resources to community outreach, funding clinics in underserved areas, and supporting families who couldn't afford critical care. We partnered with schools and universities to create scholarship programs and mentorship opportunities, aiming to inspire the next generation of scientists, doctors, and innovators, especially those coming from backgrounds like Faye's, humble, struggling, but fiercely determined. Establishing these programs was deeply personal. I remembered the isolation and rejection we had faced, the moments when hope seemed out of reach. We wanted to ensure that others wouldn't have to walk that lonely path alone. We worked tirelessly to create networks of support that could nurture talent and passion, regardless of economic status or family background. This shift toward community and legacy was also a healing balm for the wounds we carried from my fractured family relationships. Over time, walls that once seemed impenetrable began to crumble. Some members of my family who had distanced themselves reached out, seeking reconciliation and understanding. These encounters were not always easy. Old resentments and pain lingered, and forgiveness was a slow, often difficult process. But we approached these moments with openness, determined to rebuild bridges where possible without sacrificing our own well-being or values. The lessons I learned through these experiences changed me profoundly. I came to understand that family is not just defined by blood or inheritance, but by mutual respect, empathy, and the willingness to grow together. Sometimes, the family we choose through shared values and support is more enduring than the one we are born into. On a personal level, Faye and I found ways to nurture our relationship beyond the chaos of our professional and personal battles. We made time for each other, celebrated small victories, and created rituals that grounded us. Quiet dinners, weekend hikes, moments of laughter and silence. These simple acts became the foundation of our happiness, reminding us that no matter what storms we weathered, we had each other. The journey had taught us that love is not just an emotion, but a daily choice, a commitment to stand together through joy and pain alike. As our company continued to grow, we focused on innovation that was ethical, inclusive, and sustainable. We became advocates for responsible science, pushing for transparency and collaboration in an industry often criticized for secrecy and greed. We believe that true progress could only be achieved by lifting others up, not by tearing them down. This philosophy resonated widely and further distinguished our work and our legacy. Reflecting on everything, I realized that the most profound transformation was within myself. I had moved from a place defined by entitlement and expectation to one rooted in humility and purpose. The loss of my family's approval, which once felt like a death sentence, had become the catalyst for discovering my true self and my values. My identity was no longer tethered to a name or fortune, but forged through love, perseverance, and contribution. To those who feel lost, rejected, or overwhelmed by hardship, I offer this truth. Your worth is not measured by others' approval or the privileges you inherit. It lies in the courage to face your struggles, the compassion you show yourself and others, and the legacy of kindness and strength you build with each choice. The end. If you've been with me through this story, I want to say thank you. It means a lot that you're here listening to everything I've shared. If you found my journey inspiring or meaningful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really helps me share more stories like this. I'd love to hear from you. What did you think about the plot? Were there parts that surprised you or moments you related to? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know. Your thoughts and support keep me going.